All right, we're going to get fired up and get started. I'm happy to introduce to you for our first session of the day, Dr. Tony Mann. Tony Mann is going to discuss the importance of inspiring educators to re-envision and rebuild K-12 education. And I think this is just a timely space we are in history to do this, re-envisioning and rebuilding. Tony Mann is currently the superintendent of Molalla River Public School Districts in Oregon for nearly 3 decades. Tony has served as a public school leader, leading schools and communities ranging from rural America to the suburbs, from Oregon's wine country to diverse urban settings. Early in his school leadership career, while serving as a principal, Tony led a diverse middle school community to receive rating of outstanding on the Oregon School Report Card. For the last 12 years, he has worked as a superintendent of schools for the Molalla River School District, K-12 semi-rural school districts, which they say is 20 minutes from everything. I mean, and listen, I'm a former superintendent, so if you serve as a superintendent for 12 years, man, that's 5 lifetimes. So congratulations, Tony. You know, I know that's 12 lifetimes. That's hard work. But what I love about Tony is that he believes a revolution is required to move K-12 schools toward the well-being of all students and the health of our country. Across his career, Tony has led schools from school systems to excellence, which means we know it can be done. But when you think about this term revolution, people are like, revolution. Revolutions can be a good thing. Change can happen. Good things can happen. Tony believes one key attribute of successful schools is the recognition of that students are individuals that we serve. Tony is a member of CASA, which is the Confederation of Oregon School Administrators, the Association of Supervision and Curriculum Development, our friends at ASCD, and the American Association of Administrators, AASA, where he and I have probably crossed paths many times in doing this work around making sure there are 56 million students who walk into public schools every day. And this is where we do deep work for our students. He has presented to audience large and small on instructional practices, leadership strategies in schools, and organizational design. And for the purpose of producing measurable, key word here, measurable results for an inspired student. Tony, thank you for being here today. I'm going to unshare my screen so you can share and let the revolution take place. Ladies and gentlemen, Tony.
Oh my goodness, Tracy! Thank you for the introduction. I am feeling really blessed here today to be able to be in this space with everyone. I'll admit right up front, about 25 years ago, I recall. I mean, I can still see it in my mind's eye. I was in an auditorium with probably 200 people, and it was a 4-day deep dive with Jay McKay 25 years ago, and as I'm hearing him speak this morning, I'm reminded how much his work has influenced my thinking over time. And so thank you, Jay, for kicking us off. The idea of a revolution, right? I've been sitting with that here, even as you're referencing it, Tracy, and out of a revolution comes dramatic change, right? Is it really change with what the word revolution suggests? And as I'm sitting here this morning, maybe it's not. Maybe a better way for me to be thinking about it and talking about it is a metamorphosis, because we might have this beautiful little caterpillar that's been marching up the tree for a long time, but it's time for that butterfly, or for that caterpillar to fly and be something really different for kids and community. And I think about my time. I'm just another guy on the bus, but I've had a chance to learn from some really talented people. And one of the mindsets I have for change and inspiring change and being part of change is this idea of, we're all in this sailboat together. Imagine a sailboat. And if you've ever been in a sailboat, there are those moments where the sail sort of falls and you're not moving, you're just sitting there in the water. And other moments when the boat starts moving forward. And then there might be moments where, gosh, is this boat going to tip over? And I feel like it's our duty as educational leaders to keep enough wind in the sails so that that boat keeps moving, enough dynamic tension, enough pressure, enough accountability for self and others, that change continues to occur, but not so much that it tips that boat over. And so maybe revolution, because it has some negative connotations, might be one I wanna let go of. But it's a charge. It's this calling to do something bold that I wake up for every day. I'm gonna tell some stories, and I've got some slides I'll share. And I'm gonna go ahead and transition to my slide deck here.
And Tony, I love that you talked about the call to action, right? To do something. And sometimes in education, we get a little nervous about a call to action, but I love that you are going to address this and your slides are up and we're ready to go. For the folks who are watching, make sure you use the Q&A to provide any questions you might have and share the chat just with your general thoughts. Somebody already talked about crusaders and I love it.
And just to check my technology, am I right, Tracy? You can see a slide with my two children on it.
I can see your two children on it. Beautiful children.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah, these are my two boys, Miles and Eli, and this is a long time ago. We were camping in high desert Oregon. Oregon has a lot of different geographies. My school district, Molalla River School District, is in the Willamette Valley, and as Tracy said, we're really 20 minutes from everything, from the base of Mount Hood to the state capitol to downtown Portland, the largest city in Oregon. And it's a special place, largely an identity that continues to be in change. It's a community that was rooted in timber and the timber industry. And as that changed over time, Molalla became a commuter district, a bedroom community to the larger metropolitan areas around us. And it's a community that wants so much for its children, just like I wanted for my children when they were this age. Miles was probably about 3.5. Eli might have been 2, and they were playing outside. Miles said he was the trainer. They were like at the zoo, and Miles was the monkey trainer, and Eli was the monkey. And Miles would dare Eli to climb trees and jump out of trees, and that personality has persisted over time. Miles is the sort of the verbal director, and Eli is the doer and the dramatic one. If I fast forward to several years ago, I'm going to talk about both my children. We all have our stories, right? We all have our stories. My stories shape my purpose each day. This is Eli graduating high school. Now, Eli did not graduate high school on a traditional path. My wife and I, you'd think an educator would know exactly how to help themselves when their kid is struggling, and it took a lot of support from other people to help my son graduate, and that'll become clear as I share a little bit of his story. And graduation at the end of the day was a mindset for me that was my purpose as an educator, and there's nothing wrong with that being the primary summative measure. I would argue that it's not sufficient to say that our students graduate and walk across stage, that it needs to be something more than that. Something more bold, something more inspiring. And so when I think about our school district here in Molalla, really this question of why do we exist is one that really frames a rethinking both about mission and vision, and in our engagement with our community, and most importantly, in our engagement with students. Why do we exist? Why do we as educators exist? Why has our country placed so much faith in public education to level the playing field and create opportunity? I'm one of those who believes that public education is the backbone to democracy, and we have a real responsibility to help our students be their best selves, and for humanity to press forward. The future is bright. I absolutely believe that. One measure of success in Molalla River School District about, oh gosh, this is my 12th year here. 6 years ago, we hit a point in on-time graduation. And if I compare where the likelihood was that a student would graduate on time from the district when I arrived and the school board really took on the identity that it has, about 68% of our students were graduating on time. And as I came on board as a superintendent, this was a clear indicator that we weren't reaching our potential. It's not that teachers weren't working hard, educators weren't coming to work inspired each day. It's that we just needed to adjust our measure of the true north that we were sailing toward. And with the hard work that Jay spoke about, the importance of mapping curriculum, but mapping isn't what we're about. I'll come back to that idea. It's a key anchor. It's a key anchor. And gosh, I love that image of a river with two shores, two banks. You write the standards mapped and expectations on one side, and teacher voice and experiential learning on the other, defining that student experience. And yet the mapping is key. Right, we mapped the standards. We ensured that every student had access to those standards. We assessed against those standards in all core areas. And 6 years later, we were at 91% of our students graduating on time from the Molalla River School District. And that doesn't happen overnight. I'm one of those who believes a data shift in 1 year or 2 years is sort of a false indicator. But when you have over 6 years, 7 years, this steady march from 70% to 90%, that was lasting change, I believe. And it has proven to be. We'll never stop until it's all kids. All means all in the Molalla River School District. And what I was really blown away by in our community is I would be out, whether it was at schools or community events, athletic events, and I'd find opportunities to talk about this change, this measurable change. And what I was really surprised by is no one really said these words, but the return, what I got back from the individuals with whom I would be speaking typically was, well, that's nice, but it's not inspiring. Now, again, no one used those words. But they clearly said in nonverbal ways that 91% on-time graduation was nice, but was that really what we were about? Jay raised the question earlier around if we look outside of ourselves, if we look out to economies and communities, what is the present day telling us we need to be doing to set our students up for success? And it's not a surprise, I think, to anyone, to recognize that things are different today than they were in the 1930s. And yet we really did inherit a system of education that is designed largely during the Industrial Revolution. And with most students coming to school each day, believing they needed to learn basic facts, they needed to follow instructions. And yes, those were important skills in an industrial mindset, right? Can someone follow instructions? Do they know basic skills? And yet it's so much more than that today. And I recognize I'm preaching to the choir here a bit. I'm hopeful that as I continue to tell a few stories, that it inspires you in your storytelling, because it's through those that I believe I've come to understand what's possible for kids, not because I've seen it in text or I've read about it solely, but because I've seen it in real life. It's not just the intellectual work, but it's the heart-led work of what it means to really establish a vision for kids that aligns with what every parent might hope for their own. Well, I'm going back to my own children here again for a moment. Like every parent, I had a hope that my children would live, vibrant and compelling, develop vibrant and compelling visions for themselves. And today, they have that, but it didn't come without a great deal of struggle. Now, do I think that struggle is important in life? You bet. But my youngest son's struggle with finding his own calling was a function of that old system, that outdated system, education 1.0, that expected kids simply to learn basic facts and follow instructions. In kindergarten, my son's favorite activity at school was an after school club in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade. Every year he talked about how he wanted to participate in this after school club. And the name of the club was How It Works. How It Works was an after school club taught by the custodian. The custodian's inspiration for kids and influence on my own son's life was powerful. Every day they would gather up in a part of the school and they would take old things, used things, old mailboxes, old vacuum cleaners, old tricycles, and the children would learn how to use some basic tools and they'd take those apart. That reverse engineering was part of what inspired my son. He has gifts in the world that don't necessarily fit in the traditional school mindset. His gifts are solving problems in the world with his hands. He is a capable reader. He's a capable mathematician. Today, he's a small business owner in Tucson, Arizona. He's a plumber, and he's just doing beautifully. The experience that he had in school, though, began to shift. And it was sometime in middle school. This is sort of, for what it's worth, I like to share a picture of my family. You know, this is why I exist. First is my family, and second for my service to communities. My youngest son to the right in the photo here was entering middle school about here, sixth grade, and his experience was not what we would hope for in middle school. But before I get to that, I want to tell you another story about how his identity of solving problems in the world with his hands manifested itself. One day, when he was 12, my wife and I decided, I think at 12 years old, you can allow your child, right, to stay at home for a couple of hours on their own. And this is how you get a hold of us, Eli, if you need anything. It was that coming of age moment. And we got home, and our son he'd found a pile of bricks on the side of the house, and he dug a section of our backyard out, and he dug a hole. And I don't know who taught the boy to mix concrete, but somehow he mixed himself some concrete, and the fire pit in the center of this next photo was well on its way to being constructed when my wife and I got home that day. Now, my 12-year-old son did not learn that from me. He did not learn that from experiences that he had at home, and nor did he learn that from experiences that he'd had in a traditional classroom. I believe he learned it from the custodian who taught that class after school, How It Works, and his grandfather. Interestingly, his superpowers of solving problems in the physical world, you can imagine, Eli, we've all had kids like Eli in class. His gifts were not appreciated at times. And there was a moment, and this is not a criticism on any one educator or educators, but we all get to a moment where we're really struggling with a student. And, you know, my son tells me today that, Dad, education failed me. I'm so glad that my 25-year-old son can tell his superintendent father that education failed him, because it's helped shape my understanding of where we need to go. In middle school, he had an experience with a teacher, and the message that he received, whether it was these words or not, was, if you don't start following my instructions and behaving, Eli, you won't be able to be anything but a janitor. And his heart was, I think, scarred. One of his mentors in life was a janitor, inspired him to solve problems with his hands. And so then I looked to where he went, and he got there. Boy, I'll tell you, he is awfully successful as a business owner, and a plumber. And it comes back to some things that make me think, if school had, at that moment in time, given my son what Jay talks about, and that idea of ensuring that the big ideas are big in the minds of the learner, that's what matters. So my son, I'm sure, in middle school was learning facts that help him in his plumbing. The mathematics that he uses every day are significant, but he didn't see an application. And in our district, in the Molalla River School District, we've really looked at getting clear in mission and vision around what the purpose is. And it's so much more than students walking across a stage at graduation time. For us, the vision, the why we exist, is so that every student has the opportunity and access to explore and pursue their own aspirations, paving the way for a promising future. That wasn't written by me in my office. That was written by folks in the community, those same folks who said that 91% on-time graduation it was nice, but it wasn't inspiring. And really, when I think about this vision statement that was prepared by voices from across our community, listening to the hearts of Molalla, it's about each and every student's aspirations. And not every student aspires to go to college. Not every student aspires to work in the trades. It's our job to give them a vision for themselves. And one of the pieces that we've done is our partnership with Define Learning that has helped us move in that direction. It's just one of many tools. It's not really, at the end of the day, this work about helping students envision a future that is more than just a diploma is buoyed by Define Learning, but it's just part of the story that I'll tell. I want to highlight one unit that a great teacher in our district, Will Hewitt, delivered over the last couple of weeks, and share a couple of videos. This is a 5th grade classroom using Define Learning to take all the skills that my son or your daughter or your son, all of our kids, see in a way that applies to a real world experience. The park designer unit happens to be one that took place just over the last couple of weeks at Molalla Elementary School. And I'm going to share a couple of videos, and if I've done this correctly, you'll be able to hear the audio. And Tracy, just to make sure, if you wouldn't mind, just give me a thumbs up that you can hear the audio when this begins.
We can't hear audio right now.
Okay.
Or maybe I can't hear audio. Let me make sure. I don't hear audio, and I turned my sound all the way up. No audio from the audience also, so let's try it again.
Okay, well, if this is possible, I think what I'm going to need to do is, thanks a bunch for your patience while I do this. We'll see if I can do two things at once.
And if not, maybe we can put closed caption on and play it without the audio. And I know, thank you, Sherry. They'll have it when you hear the deck.
Let me try this one more time and give me a thumbs up. Mr. Hewitt's going to begin talking here. And if it doesn't work this time, then I've got one more strategy.
Project-based learning has been really exciting this year. It's a really dynamic way to show the kids basically how to get them excited about science, but in ways that involve so many different skills at one time. So when we're doing project-based learning, we found that they're collaborating, they're researching, they're solving problems, and then they're producing at the end, which is always really great. So for this project, we're doing the park creation project, and it's been really awesome. We're focusing on a lot of different things at once. So we got producers and consumers for different environmental ecosystems. And so the kids have to go and research different areas and different things would be involved in those specific areas. And then they get a choice of figuring out how they want to actually come up with their product for their park. So we have a brochure, we have a presentation, and then they can actually create a whole map of a park. And so for this one, it's been really specific because we have to look into the city of Molalla, and so we're learning all about the history that goes into that as well. And so we're kind of just starting our journey right now with this project, but it's been really great so far.
And Mr. Hewitt's reference to the city of Molalla are one of the 5 banded tribes of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. And the park design, in addition to being project-based like you saw here, that connection back with the local indigenous history, ensuring that the students are learning relevant, historically accurate connections to Native people. Again, this idea that this is all fully integrated is part of what inspires different kinds of learners. Now, if you're like me, I've been in classrooms where sometimes I might wonder, this is inspiring, this kids are active, but is it connected to standards? That's really been an essential piece of our work with defined learning and project-based learning generally, is to ensure at the beginning of any planning process, right, as Jay reminds us, starting with the end in mind is critical. And so knowing that these skills are where the teacher's taking the students is essential. I want to talk for a moment about this idea that each of our students has an inspired vision for themselves beyond the graduation stage. And if I can do that for just a moment, when I think about my son, if my son had an opportunity to have his gift of solving problems in the world with his hands reinforced in schools, I believe that there's a higher likelihood that his pathway towards a successful career in the trades would have been a little less bumpy. Now, is that necessarily true? I'm not sure, but I know that the message that my son shares with me today, again, that public education failed him, that he did not see this vision for himself during school, is the calling, right? Somehow in our mind in Molalla, and you'll see a graphic later on that illustrates this, if each and every student begins developmentally in the later elementary grades, envisioning for themselves how their skills will translate beyond the graduation stage, and they begin envisioning, somehow in my mind, 5th graders in our district are going to become, are going to have the opportunity this next year to, at the end of 5th grade, in a closing conference with their parents, their grandparents, maybe their youth pastor, their soccer coach, in a closing student-led conference, share their hope for themselves. And that hope might change, right? I know that I didn't know what I wanted to be when I was in 5th grade, but I had some thoughts. And I can imagine 5th graders sharing with their parents, you know, this year, mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, I learned that my gift is one of my gifts is solving problems in the world with my hands. And I've learned through some career-related learning opportunities that there are lots of ways I could do that. I could be an engineer and design buildings. And the student could go on and explain that. I also learned when I broke my arm that a surgeon, you know, puts people's bones back together. I could do that too. And I recognize that that would require lots of post-secondary education. My son might also then turn around and say, and I'm a helper. I can help as a surgeon. I can help by building homes. I also learned this last week that plumbers are helpers too. And we had a plumber in our classroom, and I learned that if a plumber turns on someone's water who's been off for a week, that they get a hug from the mom and invited to dinner on Sunday. And as cheesy as that might sound here today, I'm envisioning that 5th graders might be able to then, as they go into middle school, if those aspirations for themselves are something their teachers are aware of, that their teachers might be better empowered to tap into their multiple intelligences and their inspiration. Now, that might change throughout middle school, certainly it will. But as students enter high school, having those career-related learning experiences and a post-secondary vision for themselves begins to crystallize. And again, you'll see a reference to that on another slide in a moment. I'm gonna flip to another video. If we go back to this classroom with those fifth graders and Mr. Hewitt and see where they went with this unit.
And I love what you guys have done at looking at what are the needs and then incorporating that into your designs. So what I might suggest to you guys to move forward and actually maybe end up with a design that we could build, because we've got too many designs to try and build them all, right? So in the future, as we identify new parkland in order to build new amenities and new parks on that, one of the things that might be really helpful to us, and I think that the city council would be very, very willing and eager to hear about, is if you guys could work together as a group and kind of like Dan talked about a minute ago, get it down to one design, right? One design that has, and you're gonna have to compromise. Some folks are gonna want basketball courts, others are gonna want ponds. Maybe we could do both.
So the two individuals you have in front of the classroom here are the city manager and assistant city manager. And that was part of the student's experience with presenting to an authentic audience. And you heard the challenge there a moment ago. Can you as a classroom synthesize all of this into a single presentation for the city council? And let's flash forward to that. I might bounce and hit a couple of other slides too, but let's watch that one next.
This park project has been awesome, and we just again so appreciate the opportunity. So I want to go over a little bit on project-based learning. Mr. Womack said, "Hey, do you feel like creating a amazing park project, presenting it to the city council, and doing it with your whole class?" And I'm like, "Let's go for it."
Then we presented our parks to the city managers, and then we made a team to combine all of the best things of our parks into one. That's the one we made today.
The main purposes we decided on for our dream parks for Molalla are to be kid-friendly, inclusivity, community events, art, Friday food, and Molalla history.
So the areas that we all voted as the most popular were having an amphitheater for music and community events, food trucks on Fridays, trails for walking and bike riding, a basketball court, a pond for ducks and other Molalla wildlife, and a playground for kids to play with a zip line for all sizes and ability levels.
I was a part of the map makers and we are all good at drawing. I'm interested in maybe doing engineering or architecture. We had to really work together to combine all the ideas of the 7 original groups into one map.
Tim is actually a drummer in a band already, and so he wants to talk about, he's the amphitheater creator, so he's got a lot of ideas here with his Nirvana shirt. So let's go.
The biggest thing we wanted for the park was we all really think Molalla would love a small outdoor amphitheater. Public parks often are more physical in nature, but an amphitheater would provide space for creative release. I play drums in a band, and my parents work lots of concerts. We'd really love to inspire local bands in Molalla as well as the high school music program. Having a park to play music at would really make Molalla a fun musical town. But also, the theater could also be used by drama programs to do plays and movies in the park in the summer.
So Adeline had a great idea about food trucks. So Food Truck Fridays, that's Adeline's idea.
We'd also love to celebrate the different cultures in Molalla and all of the different local restaurants. We'd love to have a park that had Food Trucks Fridays. This would be a time families and the community could come and hang out, maybe listen to music in the amphitheater and enjoy local food.
Is that when we left, we challenged them to come up with one plan, because that's the hardest part of doing a project like this. And look what they did.
Yeah.
Some of us that are adults could learn a lot from how to make something like this work, where you have to come up with one idea that everybody likes. And
Go for it.
I'm super excited to have you guys here, and I can see all the hard work that you've put into this. And if you would ever like to come attend one of our parks meeting, I would love to have each and every one of you and your parents come and join you. We'll let them come along too. But I think it's exciting what you guys have a dream for and want to see here in Molalla. And it's okay to dream big, even for zip lines. And I would love to take a picture with you guys with your map, so we can put that up on our parks website, if that's okay with you all.
Jump back to my slides in just a moment, but I wanted to pause. I see there's some great comments and a question or two in the chat, and there's one in particular that is just drawing me, and it's I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Calvia. Your observation that it might be inspiring, but that as school leaders we are under constant pressure for student performance on high stakes state tests. The correlation between what we're seeing here and performance on those state tests, I can't speak to. In fact, I'm just now finishing up my dissertation. I'll present and defend my dissertation here in a couple of weeks. But this idea of correlations and a statistical, regression analysis, right? Can you predict that kids are going to perform at higher levels because of this? Someone else, I think, maybe has done some of that research, but what I can say is this. How many of you were teaching or leading in schools during the early portion of NCLB, No Child Left Behind? Maybe a thumbs up, just to give me a sense. Is that I recognize I'm getting older and older. I might be, a couple thumbs up there. So yeah, the dark ages. So I flash back to that moment of high stakes performance, and I watch schools, and you might remember this too, throw the baby out with the bathwater. That proverbial idea of getting rid of the goodness just to focus on, one narrow item. The schools who did that, who took and really just went to drill and kill, and it was more and more of the same instead of doing something different, they got some short-term results. 2 or 3 years of significant gains in high stakes testing. But it's the schools that maintain that commitment to the whole child, that commitment to inspiration, that commitment to the fine and performing arts, that commitment to the community. Those are the schools that slow and steady won the race. Slow and steady won the race. I gave you the example earlier of moving graduation rates from 68% on time to north of 90% on time. That was slow and steady. And yes, we were doing some important things to pay attention to the whole child, but I really believe that if we're going to move from 90% to 100%, it's going to take this kind of inspiration that has kids coming to school wanting to be inspired. One of the teachers, for example, in our district, a 4th grade teacher, all of our teachers were involved in some 2nd tier training a couple weeks back with Understanding by Design, with Define Learning. And in the exit ticket, one of the teachers talked about how when she just completed a unit, that every single one, she looked back over her students' attendance. Every single student attended every single day. It was an anomaly in the data set. If you look out over the course of the year, there's 1 or 2 students absent, every day, likely every week. But for this 2-week period, every student was present every day. And, one example does not a statistically significant correlation make, but the idea that students are wanting to come to school because of the relevance that they are experiencing, I believe will be part of what's necessary if we're gonna keep the boat moving in the ocean, that sailboat, right? Enough pressure, enough wind in the sails to keep moving forward, but not so much that it tips the boat over. I'm going to go back to
Tony,
yes.
As you switch back, this is a very relevant question, and I just want to share with everyone. We are going to provide you some data points and research in a follow-up email around what this looks like for student outcomes. There's some great research studies that have been done by Define to correlate those pieces around academic return on investment. As a former superintendent, Tavi, it's such a great question because we all know, everybody in this room knows this. If you can do all the wonderful things, but if kids aren't reading, if the graduation rate going up, people are like, well, how did that help? So we are going to provide you some research on districts where we're showing improved outcomes. And I think this is important. You'll see outcomes from a variety of schools. So sometimes people go, well, that only works in a magnet school. No, we're going to show you research from Title I schools that fit the profile, of students who might not be able to achieve, where we actually see significant gains. Because I think what Tony is doing in his district is authentic learning. And when kids have authentic, organic learning, they take ownership of it. So I'm going to hand it back over to you, Tony, but I do want our participants to know that they will get some research, good research and data coming out around this. Back to you, Tony.
Thanks a bunch, Tracy. Yeah. I knew someone would have the evidence to point to. Here's another example that I want to speak to. There's no video here. I wish I would have taken a video. This is a high school statistics class. Speaking of statistics, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. I had the opportunity just last week to be in this office space and have students present their end of term project, which was a project undertaken by the entire class, where they divided and conquered a relevant, meaningful task that they identified in survey data regarding the school climate at our high school. Looking back at data that had been taken by a large firm, we had this school climate data, important data. The students looked at that and they said, that's great and all, but it doesn't give any actionable, we don't really see anything actionable that's going to make a difference for us in those data. We just see big questions and we can't connect it to our daily life. So this classroom of students conducted their own random sample survey of 200 students in our high school. And the focus was, again, school climate and students feeling safe and feeling part of a community. They were measuring those two big ideas. Am I safe physically and emotionally? And do I have membership? Do I have belonging? To watch these students present an end of term project, and we've all been there, right? So I recognize I'm preaching to the choir, but the relevance that was here when the students then turned around and said to myself and our principal, Dr. Atherton, we expect you as the principal to do something with these data. These data are leading to certain conclusions about things that the adults in our school can do to improve outcomes on school climate. That site council is going to implement some of the suggestions that came from the student statistics class and go back and resurvey that same student body again in 12 weeks. And I somehow in my mind, I believe that it will cause a change and inspire these students even further that their work was meaningful. I never had that experience that I recall in high school, and that's what our kids need today to be able to envision a relevance after graduation. Speaking of relevance, I looked this one up. In today's vernacular, right? Relevance means applicable, appropriate, connected to matters of importance, intelligible, meaningful, understandable. I did that etymology just as Jay did earlier. And I was blown away. I had no idea, right? So the Oxford English Dictionary tells us the history of the word is born out of ideas like nourish, to be nourished, to educate, to raise, to lift up. And I believe that we have that opportunity. We won't nourish and lift up just by teaching to state tests. We have to inspire with career-related relevant learning. And again, I recognize I'm preaching the choir. I'm going to share a couple more slides and then I'll wrap. This is a quote that I heard recently: "You can't be what you can't see." Marion Wright Edelman, who was the partner of Dr. Martin Luther King's in the civil rights movements in the 60s. It rings true for me today. So when I think about fifth graders on through high school having career-related learning opportunities, we've mapped out what those can look like for our students, and looking to have our teachers not only aligned to standards, but have project-based learning that's relevant, is what I believe will be necessary for that transformative change, so that schools are not just transactional, but transformative. I am going to stop right here on this slide and go back to something I heard Jay said. It's that presentation to a meaningful audience that makes it, that summative experience, most powerful. And in my 12 years in the Molalla River School District, this was a moment where I felt like our community was coming together. Yes, they still know that 90% plus of our students graduate on time. And now, as a result of this kind of public experience, seeing that kids' work is something that's inspiring and connected to roles that come after high school graduation. Whether I'm the park designer, I'm the landscape architect, whether I'm the musician, whether I'm the person pouring the concrete, I have a vision for myself somehow in that relevant community-wide project. I'll stop rambling. Tracy, I wish everybody the very best as you look to the next iteration of Education 2.0. This is how we're doing it in Molalla. And I believe that a couple of years from now, that we will have close to 100% on time graduating, not just with the diploma, but with an inspiring vision for themselves. Got you on mute there, Tracy.
The one time I forget to hit unmute, first of all, I'm going to put my slide back up with your name. But first of all, you are doing some amazing work there. And I love this idea around these real life experiences that we forget to give kids. And if you follow the chat, people love when they were presenting to the city council and talking about their work. When it resonated with me, before I give you the question that's asked, was I thought about Goli Muhammad's Cultivating Genius. And when you think about those fifth graders, you talked about the closing student-led conferences. Pay attention, folks. He didn't just say to their parents. It could have been to a coach. It could have been to some adult, some person that is influential in their life, which I appreciated that. What is their hopes and dreams for themselves? That's when you start cultivating the genius in kids, right? Everybody's not going to be, some scientists who calculate something. Like they have their own hopes and dreams, and that's where we get into the genius. So I appreciated that. So one question we have is, did the park really happen?
So it has not happened yet, but it will happen. The city council and the city parks committee, they invited those students back, and this truly was just presented a couple of weeks back. So I envision it in the future as a special place.
Oh, I love that it's just so recent too. And I love that, I don't know about you as a kid, but I didn't know there was a city council in the fifth grade, and I was a smart kid. So I love that these real life experiences and contributing to their community and how it works is happening at such an early age. Another question that was asked, is there a better end, which relates to the standard to be explored or the product to be shared? Or both. Like, I'm going to throw in a book. They just wrote explored or the product to be shared, or both. Or it depends on, like, it has a variety of things you have to consider.
Well, I really appreciate that question, and it pushes me back to just some core values that I hold, that our work has to be both about the intellect and the heart. And so my answer to that would be that it needs to be both and, right? It's the outcomes and the presentation. It's that I've developed the knowledge, skills, and habits of mind to apply them, but that by itself isn't sufficient. It's the culminating experience of design and presentation that really moves it to that memorable, inked experience that sits on my mind's eye forever.
And then I'll close with the last question, which could be a tough question. And sometimes people ask us questions because like, as a superintendent, how would I answer this? And I know what my answer would be, but we'll share. It says, do you introduce collectivism, all are spokes in a strong wheel, versus hierarchy of a ladder? Some positions are above others. Great question.
Oh my, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I talk often about how each pathway and purpose and inspiration is just as important as the other, that it's not one is more than or less than, it's that it takes everyone together. And I want to go back to the thing that you heard the city manager say at the end of that presentation. I don't know if you caught it, but he said to the city council, we tasked these students with going together and taking all of their ideas and synthesizing them into one. And look at what they did. Adults have a hard time coming together to solve problems together. We can learn something from the students. And I thought, spot on, right? It takes all of us, each of us, and our gifts together. And the idea that one is more than or less than just simply isn't the case in our district in the way we talk about pathways post-graduation.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think about as a school superintendent, like, I think kids, as we matriculate kids up, right? Like we don't graduate kids to their senior year, but right, it's the work that we do. I think they need to understand both, because in the real world, right? We all do have to work together, and like, there's a CEO of a company, right? Or there's a principal, and there's teachers, and I always use this term, so I hope I don't offend anybody. The master is no greater than the servant, but we have different roles, right? And when we have those different roles, right, there are positions that are above other, because those positions might pay more. The principal is probably getting paid more than the teacher, right? So as we talk about college and careers and all these pieces, to ensure we are being very honest with our students as they go, but it's not I'm better than you, but this is how we all work. Some of my best ideas as a superintendent came from students, right? It's like, the adults couldn't think of that, but look how the students came up with that in the student advisory board, and we put the play into action. So first of all, thank you, Tony, for being here, and starting with that comment about, the revolution, because I know some people be like, oh, and, but we have to do things different for the kids we serve. If we want every kid who walks through our door to be successful, right? We got to think about, as you talked about, re-imaging, rebuilding the educational system. And while test scores are important, because I'm a believer that tests are important, we can't get away from them, but the whole child, everything we do for a kid to ensure that we see the genius in every boy and girl, because I have a similar story about like you do with a kid, with my own personal kids, have an opportunity to be their best, and we expose them and captivate and inspire them with what's important to them. So the whole fifth grade conferencing resonates with me. So thank you for spending time with us on this hour. Fantastic, loved it. Your materials will be provided, and this session will also be provided to our folks. For all of you who are out there joining us in this webinar, I got about 3 minutes if you got to go to the bathroom, because it's a long day on this webinar. If you want to go get something to drink, I'll be back with you in 3 minutes to get us kicked off with our next session. For those of you who are joining in, make sure you drop your name in the chat and let us know where you're from, and we'll get started in 2 minutes.